As a cabinet minister, my own mind was concentrated on looking at what percentage of irregularity are we talking about. Is it enough to vitiate or destroy the majority? There's no Supreme Court in the world that has cancelled a presidential election based on a fraction of irregularity and then throw away the 80-something or 70-something. It's very rare. It's never happened. So, and I looked at the data of violence in Nigerian elections in the last 30, 40 years. I think the lowest number of deaths was recorded in this election. That's one. Two, Yaga and a few other notable international observers, right, they said beavers work in 88% of the places. So they are, we see, I see the cup half full, not half empty. A number of positives came out, but you've seen people who just want to amplify the negatives. But I'm sure the negatives are not enough to drown the success we have recorded. So as a cabinet minister, I am confident that the process has reflected the wishes of the majority of Nigerians. And let no one try to take that away, unless the courts decide otherwise. Don't forget, we're talking about the presidential election was also hinged on the senatorial, on the House of Rep. That same process that produced the president also produced the senators and the House of Reps. Why are people not saying, oh, the House of Reps election was rigged, this one was rigged? It's the same process on the same day, by the same electoral umpire. So you see, democracy is still in a stage where it's growing, is maturing. The culture of democracy is also, look at the American history. Look at how many years it took to refine. And even up to now, it's not 100%. There's no election that is 100%. In this country, Al Gore's election was disputed for a long time. The last election was also disputed, and we saw what happened. But ultimately, with what happened in America, we saw the triumph of institutions. We saw the triumph of the rule of law, of the law of law. And Biden, who won, in spite of the massive social media, TV network attacks and the rest that sought to plant in the minds of people that Biden never won. There was voter suppression. There was XYZ. But we saw a clear day. We saw a clear day that showed that, look, Biden won the election. Again, I say the burden of proof is upon whoever alleges. We are not worried. Let them come to court and prove that the elections were rigged. They were not rigged.
Now let's digress a little bit to your cabinet position. You are leaving the sports ministry. What is the state of sports at the moment in Nigeria as you get ready to hand over to a new administration?
Well, let me start by saying when we took over in 2019, we were very clear-headed. We started out by trying to really understand what are the things that have been the bane of sports development in Nigeria. First, we found out that even from definition, there was a misconstruction because sports development was seen then as episodal funding of competitions. You're going to Commonwealth, they get you money. You're going to Olympics, you get money. Just money to fund championship and competitions. But sports development is bottom-up, grassroots, school sports, schools competition, Principal's Cup, football, and all of that. And then you find talent, you nurture them, you develop them. So we looked at grassroots sports development as one area of concentration. We look at sports infrastructure across the country. Nigeria did not have sporting infrastructure, and it starts with the big stadia and the facilities. Uyo, owned by the state government, was the one that was, a semblance of. I was in Zurich, the headquarters of FIFA, and we're trying to lobby them to give us the hosting of the Women FIFA Cup. And we came so close, but at the headquarters in Zurich, they told me, point blank, you don't have the facilities. And I left that there and said, okay, I'm going to concentrate on facilities. So I decided we'll face infrastructure. And then thirdly, of course, without talking about youth yet, but around sports, staff, athletes' welfare had suffered over time. And I committed to making sure that I did something in the line of athletes' welfare. So these 3 key areas were what we put forward. And how have we done? First, lack of funding was the elephant in the room.
Right.
I found out that over the years and over the decades, the Ministry of Sports got 25-30% of what it needed for sports development. So it's always a struggle. And that's why infrastructure were left unattended to.
How did you tackle it?
Yeah, so we came up with a public-private model. We call it Adopt Initiative, in which we developed about 2 or 3 flavors. The first flavor was Adopt an Athlete. And we said, look, we need support for these athletes. And we did the Adopt an Athlete. We pitched the profiles of our athletes to organizations and individuals. At the end of it, 48 of our athletes got support on that. Home base got $10,000 or its equivalent. Foreign base got $20,000 or its equivalent. It's never happened before. And we saw that really help our athletes in subsequent performances they had over time. We looked at the infrastructure and we said, unless we get private money into this, we will never be able to do it. So we said, the 2 most iconic sporting arenas that we have is National Stadium Surulere and also National Stadium Abuja. We said, let's pitch. So we did a pitch. We had to defend and make a presentation. I met Dangote myself. I did a presentation myself. And he said, look, I'm going to support with a ceiling of $1 million. And we said to them, what can $1 million cover? The pitch, the digital scoreboard, and some other repairs around the stadium. That's what we did that. I met Premier Lotto, made the same presentation. It took a while. And he's agreed, look, I'm going to put down $450 million to do 3 priority things. We had a checklist, and it says I'll do the stadium, I'll do the football pitch, I'll do the track, I'll do the digital board. We've completed Abuja. The one in Surulere is 40%, is 80% ready. The 3 aspects are 80% ready. Don't forget, and I keep saying it, Surulere was built in 1972. It's 51 years old.
Right.
Left abandoned, unmaintained for 20 years. Left to the vagaries of weather. Left to people who came in, who took away virtually anything valuable within that premises. We came in and said, we will start a process of restoration. That process of restoration is a journey, but we achieved that. Then when it comes to grassroots sports development, we made sure that we brought back on a consistent basis the National Sports Festival. We continued with it. The National Youth Festival for our younger ones, secondary schools, we continued it. Then we introduced a national football competition. Before it was just restricted to a couple of states. We started that, as we speak, is at the zonal level, just to kind of start all of that. But the most important thing with it was to develop a policy called the sports industry policy. It's called the sports as business. We took 3.5 years to develop this document. And for the first time, we reclassified sports from recreation to business. And we built a business model around our sports. It's been approved. And it's looking at 65%, getting 65% of our sports funding from the private sector. The government has approved incentives for that. It is incentives that will attract private sector to come. That policy document is a policy document that will span 5 to 10 years. If it's fully implemented, then we can have private sector participation. The future of sports development is hinged on private sector participation. The government of Nigeria, and I dare say most governments, do not have the capacity. And when you look at even governments that have, they've developed that model such that it's the private sector. Sports is business. And for our country, we have set that process in place. We have set clear markers. We have produced a document a policy that can drive it.
What has been the responses so far from 1, business, and 2, the people that you developed them for, the ordinary Nigerian? You know,
changes are very difficult. And the moment you abhor or reject change as an individual, as a society, or as an ecosystem, then you begin to rotten. You don't progress. So we have started with trying to have an orientation, a reorientation. People have been used to just sports as a recreation. Somebody just gives money for it, government gives money. That reorientation has taken place as sports is now business. We've also shown that it's possible to get private sector funding, but you have to be clear about what you want to do. It's also about reputation. Where you have so much negativity in sports, nobody's going to put money there, even if you have a business model. And the responses we have gotten from the private sector could have been better, if not because of COVID-19 that hit. But also, it also is the function of what they get in exchange. Those from the private sector want return on investment.
Right.
They want ROI. They want to know that there's a policy that is driving that sector. A Dangote would not have invested in cement industry or flour or sugar if there was no policy driving it. Sports was just free-ranging. There was no policy. Now there's a policy that is the law. And what are these incentives? Tax breaks and tax holidays, single-digit interest rates if you invest in sports, an independent athletes welfare fund is built in, it's been approved. When it comes to the subnationals, when you take land there, state governments are expected to reduce the taxes you pay. Sometimes you could get the lease of land for free for 5 or 10 years. So those incentives are there, and they will make a difference for us. So the reception has been great, but it's going to take time. This was just approved in November. A process of awareness has started. We're planning a sports expo that will really finally just expose the potentials. We've developed the fact that there's a value chain, A to Z. When you look at the value chain of sports, sports is not just about running on the track, playing football, and going up. No, when you look at it, it's a whole colony. There's a value chain. There's merchandise, there's sports medicine, nutritionist, and all of that. You can plug in. So many people can plug in that value chain. We developed the value chain A to Z. And we know that if we keep on that message, we must market it. We must make the strongest speech. People will embrace this new future. In any case, they have no alternative because government does not have the resources.
All right. Before we go, what would you say is the legacy of Sunday Dare as Sports Minister of Nigeria?
First, a legacy of trying to bring back and reform the infrastructure that have been left abandoned for years. Because sports development is about infrastructural rationalization. We watch matches played in Wembley, we're excited about it. We watch the Real Madrid, we're excited about it. You need the infrastructure, maintain and sustain. We've made a statement in trying to do something about infrastructure. That's a legacy. We also developed a public-private model, which we have seen help both infrastructural development and also our athletes in terms of performance. You marry those together. That is key, if that is followed through. But also we delivered for the first time a policy document that has turned sports into business into Nigeria. That is a legacy even for the President Muhammadu Buhari government. And we've secured critical approvals that are necessary as incentives to open up the sports of the sports sector of our country. And built into that is a sustainable model that whoever comes along can continue in that stride, because government itself is a continuum. Beyond that, I cannot run away from the legacy we've left in youth development. For the first time, we secured a 75 billion naira Nigerian Youth Investment Fund. This fund is meant for young entrepreneurs. You know, you can get money for your ideas, for your small-scale businesses, whether registered or unregistered, for you to start some kind of business. Because the path to entrepreneurship, we've made it easier. Windows of opportunity have come up. No country has ever been able to solve its youth unemployment problem without deliberately placing its youth on the path of entrepreneurship. And what hinders entrepreneurship? Lack of access to credit. High interest rate is always a problem. We now have a 5% single-digit interest rate for our youth who take from that fund. We've shortened the process down from about 13 or 14 in commercial banks to like 5 or 6. You just provide necessary data that we need, and then you can get this money. That is also a legacy. We've done training of 380,000 youth in about 12 digital skills area, alongside many other ministries who have done something similar. Above all, I think the biggest legacy will be the fact that we have created the kind of reorientation towards sports development. We have been able to move sports to the top of the agenda. Sports development is now getting a better look. People now realize that we must put our money where it is most critical, that it is impossible to sit back and expect gold medals, World Cups to fall on our lap if we do not invest as a government, as corporate individuals, in the development of our infrastructure, in the support of the welfare of our athletes. We will not get what is needed. We've been able to wake Nigerians up to that hard fact, and we believe that the future will be better.